Most people watched the initial broadcast censorship scandal and moved on to the next political headline. Nobody caught the specific, orchestrated response that Stephen Colbert had quietly queued up for his next monologue. By midnight, 3 different news networks had completely abandoned their scheduled programming to replay the footage. By morning, the moment had been downloaded and shared 19 million times across independent digital platforms. By the following week, the very concept of corporate capitulation had been permanently redefined by a single, perfectly executed refusal to bow. All of it started because one administration assumed a parent company could successfully terrorize a comedian into delivering a public apology. The atmospheric pressure inside the Ed Sullivan Theater feels entirely wrong for a standard comedy broadcast, the air hanging heavy, thick, and undeniably electric. The brilliant studio lights push 2 stops brighter than normal, washing the iconic desk in an unforgiving, clinical illumination that bleaches the usual warmth from the audience. Stephen Colbert is already positioned at his mark, his posture perfectly still, his eyes scanning the room with the quiet, absolute control of a broadcaster who holds the detonator to his own network's legal defense. The floor director stands in the shadows near the bandstand, his headset pushed entirely off his ear, realizing the corporate-approved apology script has been completely shredded. There is no gentle bass line playing underneath his opening remarks, no polite industry chatter from the VIP section. The complete absence of sound acts as a suffocating physical presence. We have to go back 48 hours to understand the sheer weight of the impending detonation. The network's legal department had publicly released a statement directly contradicting Colbert's own account of why a political interview was blocked from the airwaves, heavily implying the host had misunderstood standard FCC regulations. Donald Trump's entrance into the narrative happens through this suffocating corporate shadow, his power attempting to claim the territory of the studio from 1,000 miles away. The screen behind Colbert flickers to life, displaying Trump's immediate digital victory lap on Truth Social, physically expanding his footprint to own every possible inch of the camera's frame. His digital text locks onto the late-night host with a flat, unwavering superiority, a tone designed to shrink any critical presence in the media landscape. He leans immediately into a relentless digital barrage, delivering his opening line with a sharp capitalization heavily disguised as casual dominance. Even his own failing network had to admit he was lying to the American people just to save face. He launches directly into a furious online onslaught, stacking his attacks in a deliberate rhythm designed to overwhelm the digital space. Without my FCC keeping these networks honest, they would just broadcast absolute partisan garbage every single night, he projects, his words echoing sharply across millions of screens. He pivots seamlessly to a deeply personal dismissal, demanding that Colbert issue a formal, on-air apology to the administration and to CBS for attempting to manufacture a fake censorship scandal. He claims total authority over the environment, loudly reminding the silent digital room that he dictates broadcast licenses, runs the regulatory agencies, and certainly does not need a lecture from a comedian who was just publicly humiliated by his own bosses. People tune in because they want absolute winners. And quite frankly, there is nobody left on that network who even knows what winning looks like anymore, he concludes, his digital footprint crossing its arms definitively. Through this entire recorded onslaught, and through the frantic backstage meetings where executives practically begged for compliance, Stephen Colbert stayed completely, terrifyingly silent. He simply absorbed the corporate pressure, his expression an unreadable mask of absolute calculation. A prominent network lawyer pacing the green room nervously adjusted his collar, the collective tension becoming a physical weight. The silence stretched out over 2 days, turning the administration's booming rhetoric into a hollow echo chamber of its own profound insecurity. Then, Colbert finally moves on live television. He shifts his weight slightly, leaning his forearms against the polished desk. And when he speaks, his voice drops significantly lower, entirely devoid of his usual late-night projection. You keep talking about power, but power doesn't usually need this much defending. The theater instantly goes dead quiet, the air freezing in the lungs of every single attendee. The massive production screen behind him bypasses the show's glossy graphics package to display a raw, high-definition scan of the official CBS legal statement that had been released to the press. Displayed here in stark, silent clarity, 50 feet wide on a comedy broadcast, the document lands like a physical blow to corporate integrity. Colbert does not raise his voice. He simply asks a devastating question about how an administration claiming absolute strength relies on the architecture of corporate cowardice to sustain it. Trump's immediate response online, triggered the moment the broadcast hits the East Coast feed, is a loud demand for the promised apology, calling the display a pathetic stunt by a failing host. Colbert counters calmly on live television, letting the digital demand hang in the dead air for a brutal 5-second pause before he quietly pulls a physical piece of paper from his jacket pocket. A low murmur ripples through the audience, a collective realization that the host is burning his own network live on the air. Colbert reaches slowly across his desk, moving with the deliberate precision of a surgeon operating on an exposed nerve. He holds up the paper, explicitly identifying it as the network-mandated apology script he had been ordered to read. He stares at it for a moment, then calmly pulls out a plastic dog waste bag, deliberately placing the corporate statement inside it and dropping it into the trash can beside his desk. The camera pushes in tight on the motion, an undeniable physical manifestation of his absolute refusal to comply. The screen behind him shifts again, displaying a meticulously documented visual timeline, connecting the exact minute the network released their statement to a simultaneous, massive surge in internal emails between CBS lawyers and FCC officials. The administration's digital proxies try to talk over the visual evidence online, their rhetoric rising in pitch as they dismiss the timeline as a desperate Hollywood hoax. Colbert slows his cadence down even further on stage, forcing the room to absorb the sheer weight of the verified corporate collusion. The tension in the theater is so thick it feels actively dangerous. A raw audio recording suddenly overrides the house sound system. It is a captured voicemail left on a production server just hours before the broadcast, an administration official's voice, stripped of equalization, explicitly thanking a network executive for successfully forcing the apology narrative. The audience is physically hit by the recording, a collective, sharp intake of breath vibrating through the stadium seating. Trump posts frantically that the audio is illegally obtained and heavily spliced by deep state operatives. Colbert does not argue. He simply displays the digital forensic verification from an independent cybersecurity firm on the main screen, proving the file is entirely, unequivocally, unaltered. A former network legal liaison, who had observed the previous 48 hours of chaos, later provided a statement that went immediately viral. His testimony was entirely procedural, detailing exactly how the network executives had panicked under the perceived threat to a massive corporate merger and decided to throw their top host under the bus to appease the White House. I rehearsed walking away 6 times in the parking garage before I finally found the courage to quit, the liaison admitted, his text-based account carrying remarkable control. Trump aggressively attacked the man's credibility online, yelling that he was fired for gross incompetence. The liaison absorbed the digital assault by letting the facts stand perfectly still. Then, a senior production assistant, a woman forced to manage the frantic back and forth between the legal team and the showrunners while under the suffocating weight of a strict non-disclosure agreement, leaked her own account to an independent journalist. Her testimony was emotionally devastating, detailing the intense isolation and the profound professional cost of enforcing a political cover-up disguised as standard legal advice. Trump posted furiously, his digital face flushed dark red, shouting that she was a traitor, betraying the loyalty of the network. The assistant's leaked statement stared directly back at him, laced with absolute titanium. "They didn't buy my silence. They rented it. And the lease just expired." The internet did not cheer or scream. It broke. One major news outlet picked up the story. Another joined. Within seconds, the digital landscape was consumed by a slow, deliberate wave of sharing, not for the late-night host, but for the truth finally breathing in the open. The main screen on Colbert's set splits in half, displaying the domestic FCC timeline on the left and on the right, matching internal network logs, proving the executives had intentionally drafted a misleading public statement to protect their merger, not to enforce actual broadcast rules. The alignment is absolute and undeniable. Trump's online denials shift frantically from screaming about the missing apology to yelling that the servers were illegally hacked, a desperate pivot that exposes the sheer naked panic beneath his anger. His digital collapse unfolds across multiple, undeniable metrics. The frequency of his posts becomes heavily erratic, his rhetoric rising and falling in rapid, shallow bursts of capitalization. His arguments, previously gripping a semblance of executive authority, begin wiping frantically at the narrative, attempting to claim he never even wanted an apology from a failing comedian. His digital posture slumps inward, his broad threats stiffening and shrinking as he leans away from the visual evidence of the massive, unedited corporate emails dominating the trending topics. His focus darts aggressively around the platform, refusing to settle on Colbert, the leaked testimonies, or the raw documents, eventually going completely, terrifyingly silent. His verbal progression spirals from confident demand to accusing Colbert of an illegal ambush, dropping into a procedural complaint about internet regulations, attempting a weak burst of bravado about his own poll numbers, and finally landing in total, absolute quiet. Colbert looks directly into the camera, his expression entirely neutral. The documents are on the table. The timeline is on the screen. The witnesses spoke. Your move. Trump's feed remains completely still. The aftermath escapes the studio like a controlled detonation. Backstage, the veteran network executives stand completely frozen, their phones lighting up as they watch the online metrics in stunned disbelief. Trump's lead communications director is seen typing so frantically on his phone that autocorrect sends pure nonsense to the press pool for 3 straight messages. Within 8 minutes, the first unauthorized clip of the monologue hits the internet. Within 20 hours, the full, unedited segment reaches 19 million views, each click spreading at viral velocity. Cable news networks immediately cut into their morning programming, their graphics departments frantically rebuilding the timeline of the corporate capitulation with red arrows and annotations. Anchors replay Colbert's defiance, allowing his thematic anchor word to sit on the screen for a full segment without adding their own commentary. Trump's counterattack fails to materialize, replaced by a devastating absence from the public conversation. Yet beneath his previous frantic demands, users reply with screenshots of the exact network emails proving the architecture of his intimidation. The public shift is instantaneous. People are no longer debating the politics of the missing apology. They are dissecting the psychology of an administration whose entire censorship facade shattered on live television. The assistant's testimony about rented silence becomes a global caption, trending worldwide as the definitive summary of the night. The story does not end with a sudden confession or a reverse policy. It burns slow, a digital fire that cannot be contained by late-night executive orders or corporate statements. Because an architecture built on corporate fear only holds until someone finally refuses to look away. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. The next confrontation is already building, and once you see what's coming, you'll understand why silence is always louder than power.